what is pornography doing to the brain? Well, first of all, it's triggering the release of dopamine and in the short term testosterone by the observation of sex, not actually engaging in human contact. So think about the young brain being significantly more plastic and willing to rewire than the adult brain. Absolutely, there's no question about it. It's hyperplastic.
Yeah.
And of course, it can rewire again, but you think about somebody who engages in a lot of porn watching, right? Watching porn, and that person is getting dopamine and testosterone increases by observing sex and not actually by engaging in human contact, okay? So that's concerning, right? And obviously the people vary, but it should come as no surprise that a lot of these people have trouble with romantic interactions when they do happen, right? Because their brain isn't conditioned to respond to those, right? And there's variation there, I'm sure. And these are private matters, so there aren't good data because there aren't laboratory experiments that you could do on this sort of thing that someone will probably do those experiments eventually. But also dopamine seeking is what triggers the increase in testosterone. But as we just talked about it, with repeated dopamine seeking or triggering of dopamine release, it starts getting diminished. So pretty soon that behavior is not causing the release of testosterone. Now people are just doing it compulsively to try and get some little droplet of dopamine out of their brain. I personally think that porn and the availability of porn is a real detriment to the developing brain, especially to the developing brain.
Yeah.
Now, it sounds like you rescued the behavior, and it takes some discipline, right? I imagine, and it's one of those things that it's also anxiety-less compared to dating and relationships where people are vulnerable on both sides and have to negotiate things like, consent and timing and, and communication and all the things that are really hard to do, but are essential to do. That's key. So I think pornography is a serious issue. And because of the way that it taps into these very primitive systems, it's as serious in my mind as some of the other drugs of abuse, like the opioid crisis. And talked about cell phones. You ever notice that when you get on a phone and you're scrolling Instagram, it's like a lot of fun. Like, this stuff is cool. You're seeing people. And then sometimes you're on there and like, this doesn't feel good, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just doing it. That's exactly how people talk about their drug use. That's exactly how people talk about alcohol use. That's exactly how people talk about gambling. You imagine this high, but the high doesn't show up. And that's, you're dopamine depleted. You need to take some time away from it and then come back and then you can enjoy it again. Now, with pornography, it's a slippery slope, right? There's also a whole aspect of pornography, which is that if people are pursuing pornography and they're not pursuing relationships, there is the potential that they reach their 20s and 30s and they are truly dysfunctional in terms of, look, every species has two major goals: protect the young and make more of itself. Whether or not you decide to have children or not is a personal issue. I personally don't have children. I may someday, but every species protects its young. The maternal aggression is amazing, right? A mother protecting its young, there's nothing like it in the animal kingdom. Actually, that's not triggered by testosterone, that's triggered by estrogen, which is interesting. But the parents of every species try and protect the young, and they try and make more young. This is every species is driven to do that. And you think about what porn and masturbation, these things really are. I'm not calling them sinful. What I'm saying is they are potentially addictive, especially with the availability of pornography. So, beware, just everyone's different and people have to be careful about these circuitries. You really need to protect them. They're super valuable. And so I would say, in keeping with our theme of, what are the other things to do to support testosterone, would be don't engage. I would avoid pornography, frankly. I really would. I would, maybe everyone's got their threshold for what's too much. For some people, the number might be 0. For other people, it might be something different. And it's going to vary. Yeah.
It would be different, maybe using your imagination versus seeing images, or like, is there a difference, if you know any of this, is there a difference between video versus, old school way of like having magazines and things like that?
Well,
because it's like more fantasy, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you thinking it through about this thing is different than you just watching it.
Or
I don't know.
even
Yeah.
remembering past experiences.
Yeah, so we can speculate there a bit. You know, a picture is worth 1,000 words and a movie is worth 1 billion pictures. When it comes to the impact that it has on your nervous system.
That's a bar.
Yeah, you know, exactly. And so, you know, I think it's fair to say that whatever problems exist in society today almost certainly existed 100 years ago, but in a different form.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We always think, oh, you know, stress was only there for the saber-toothed tiger, and now there are no tigers, and we got this thing that's really unfortunate called stress. Look, let's imagine this was 100 years ago. Spouses still cheated. People still died. You had, you know, physical challenges. There was a question of how, you know, all that stuff is baked into us at a deep level, right? None of those circuits have changed. It's just the circumstances that trigger them change. So I think that 100 years ago, it wasn't cell phones. It might, but you can bet that there were forms of pornography. They were probably more cloistered away. They weren't, you know, as out there. In certain parts of the world, it's still very, very cloistered away, despite the internet. So I think that what's healthy in this domain has never really been defined. This is one of the challenges. We know what an eating disorder is, but what's healthy eating, right? Mm-hmm. Where do you draw the line? I think given this general theme that relationships are healthy, friendships are healthy, romantic relationships are healthy, and anything that inhibits the pursuit and functioning of healthy relationships is where you have to start saying, wait a second, is this behavior getting in the way? So look, it's unlikely to be an all or none. I think, and I don't know what the line is, but we just have to be careful. Anytime we are overwhelmed with powerful images of increasing intensity, that's where you start getting into the dopamine depletion. Mm. That's where you start getting into the hormone depletion that we're talking about here. So this is also true of violence. Mm. A lot of people, they're like excited about watching zombie apocalypse violence, plus all of that violence, sex, and everything getting poured into the same film. Well, they made horror movies, 50 years ago. They were a little bit different. The question is, how strong were we driving the system? And if anyone out there is feeling underwhelmed and kind of like life is no good, et cetera, chances are your dopamine system has been pushed too hard. I'll give one quick anecdote of a friend. He's got a kid. He's 21. He graduated high school. He went to community college for a little bit, decided not to do that anymore. Then he stopped working. He stopped exercising. He's really fit. He's got like, his genetics are like Nasima's. He's kind of like, he's just got this incredible physique and all that. Doesn't do anything. Doesn't work, doesn't do anything. He's a failure to launch, as we call it. And they were analyzing, does he have ADHD? Does he this? And he heard Anna talk about dopamine depletion. And he called me and he said, I'm going to do 1 month, no video games, no phone, no nothing. He's 25 days in and he's running again. He's lifting again. He's heading back to work again. And this was somebody who thought he had ADHD. Now, there are people with ADHD out there, but what happened was he was dopamine depleted. So he couldn't concentrate. He didn't care about anything. And so the phone and just living in this constant stream of movies that are really stimulating on YouTube and everything else. I mean, you have to be, we're on YouTube right now and I use YouTube for my podcast and everything, but you have to know when to shut that valve. And here's what I tell myself: shut that valve so that I can continue to enjoy it, right? It's like gorging yourself with tomahawk steaks. They're delicious, but unless you've been fasting all day, you're not going to eat 9 of them, right? What's your record, Mark?
I think I've done 2.
2.
But yeah, 9 would be, that would be a feat.
Yeah. 2, but they were the size of, the table, but no. So if you want to continue to enjoy things and pursue things, you have to know when to slam the gate shut. And I think that no one told us that we needed to do that. Mm-hmm. That's the challenge.